Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Education is more than a book. Then you have to reward the people that are in the trenches every single day. And, people sometimes think that teaching is like a cake job. Every day, not only are you facing the students that come into school not knowing what has happened in their house or on the bus to school, it's always good to have them outside and experiencing something that isn't necessarily book related. Try to be strong. Little Mighty Mouse. Some things aren't black and white because you have to bend the rules a little bit because you know of a situation that has happened or is in progress. Sarah, I'm going to make more money than you ever saved. Yeah. And of course he did. Some kids make a big impression on you. I will say that you two were two different types of kids, and he could sit down and read a golden book. I used to put him in the playpen while I was doing my housework, and he would look at a book. He was only, 9 months old, and he would look at a book and he loved it. You would eat the book and, literally. And Richard, timestamp, they didn't do away with those types of things. And I will
conversation, we even doing podcasts anymore.
This is Lorraine Airey, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio. My first day, now remember I started in February, and there were 4 substitutes with these kids before I got there. So now I'm coming in, the kids are wild, and I can remember the first day. Now remember I was subbing in Tom's River for all those years, and then the kids were literally running and like doing flips off the wall. And I came home and I said to your father, oh my God, they really literally run up the wall. Anyway, so yes. And when the 9th graders were in the building, when I was a teacher and then an administrator, we had 1,600 kids in the building, and it was way overcrowded. And we had, 8 trailers in the back, 4 trailers on the side. And it was all right when the kids were in the class, but when the bell rang and they all came in the building, it was like chaos, and there were fights all the time. And then in the trailers, when you would open the door, there was a vacuum that was broken. And then we had fire drills all the time because the fire alarm would go down. And once that goes off, then the fire trucks have to come in and kids have to stay out. And so it was an adventure. And the funniest thing when we had the trailers, kids used to cut class and go underneath the trailers. There was lattice underneath there, and there was to get in, and they would cut class and found out that they were cutting class underneath. Be looking in at them. Okay, come on. You have to get out.
What were they do? Were they like drinking and smoking on their trailers?
Just cutting class, or that to me that was better than going 5 of you going in a bathroom, 5 girls going in the bathroom stall and smoking a cigarette over a toilet.
What year did you start teaching?
1981.
What year did you become an assistant principal?
87, I think 1990.
And what, in 96 or 95 you became a principal?
I'm not sure. It seemed like I was an assistant principal for a long time, but it was only like 4 years and then 22 years as the principal.
Did you enjoy being an administrator?
Loved it. Loved every single minute of it. It was not boring. Every day was a new adventure. You never knew, you thought you had your day planned, and then that went out the window because there was a fight or some parent came in, or, something happened with the teacher, you got to cover classes. It was an adventure that I loved. Not many people can say that they love going to work every day. I was one that loved going to work every day.
You like that? You didn't mind? Was that drive like you like to drive? Was that like a meditation for you, just to clear your head and listen to Todd Pattingale?
It was a very calming going down. I could plan my day, and not so much when I was teaching, but when I was an administrator, plan what I had to do, what parents I had to call, what kids I had to call down. And on the way home, it was really decompressing. And actually, when I first started teaching, when Richard was young, I used to listen to Howard Stern on the way home, because I was in the afternoon with split session. And I listened to Howard Stern and laughed the whole way home, listening to him with his craziness that he did. And then, then I went to regular sessions, and he wasn't on that. So used to listen to Rocky Allen, and in the morning it was Pettingill. So.
Were you going to school the whole time you were a teacher? Like, when did you start doing that?
Well, no, I didn't go to school until the day I started my graduate class. Was the day I went to the doctor and found that I was pregnant with you.
Oh, so you were a teacher for,
I was teaching
like
for
6
like
years?
5 or 6 years. Yep. Yep.
What
And
made that push for an administration?
Okay, you guys probably heard this before, and I loved teaching phys ed, but the kids were, okay, so now we're doing volleyball and we're doing skills, and they're doing the skills. And I used to try to get them in a little game every day, even when we were doing skills, to keep their interest up. But now we're doing the game. And the kids that were good at it were good at it, but kids that don't like phys ed, I'm standing on, I'm officiating the game, and I'm like, oh my God, the ball's going to hit her in the head. The ball's going to hit her in the head. Is she going to move? Is she going to move? And she didn't move. She got hit in the head. And I was like, if I'm doing this when I'm 50 years old, I can't do this, because it was, when you've been an athlete, and, you're enthusiastic about it, and the kids are not. So that's when I decided, and I was coaching with him. He said, oh, Lorraine, they're having these extension classes from Jersey City at Toms River North. You want to go to the classes? And I said, oh, yeah. And then Heather Seiden we went together. And but that's how I, got the degree. And the first night of class, Dr. Meisner went over to tell us that the criteria was changing in 2 years. And if you didn't have your degree by then, you would have to do an internship. You'd have to pay $3,000 to pay someone to do your internship. So then it was like full speed ahead. I'm getting these 42 credits done and graduating, so I don't have to do that. So I was done in 18 months. So that was the long and the short of that. So, but as you both know, I enjoyed being a student. I really liked the work that I had to do with that. And a lot of it were things that I could use, and then other things that you would never use for anything.
Now that you have free time and you love school so much, have you thought about going back to school, taking some classes in something else?
You know what, when I was retiring, I thought I would, but then I went out to see Jimmy, and then I went out to see you, and then when he was out there, and Joan and I took the cruise, and then did some other things, and then COVID hit, and so no, I thought I might want to go into real estate and do that, but no, I didn't really want to do that. And so I like getting up in the morning and doing my thing and planning my day and keeping myself busy. I see a lot of friends during the weeks. I have different groups I go out with, and I do a lot of reading. So no. I mean, at one time in school, I thought about going back for our doctorate, but the incentive was that we wouldn't have gotten paid anything else. So, and it would have cost like $60,000. So it was like, why would we be paying $60,000 and we have about 5 more years and we won't be getting any pay increase for it. So that was, and a lot of doctorate work is a lot of busy work. So endurance rather than something you would use.
Did that happen because of the administrators and that one
Yeah, and
district,
I
or-
was on the negotiating team, and we tried to get it in because went back and got her doctorate, and we tried to get her money for it, and the board just wasn't fighting for it, and we're probably the only school district around that didn't, reward people for getting their doctorate. I don't know if they have it now that you can get paid for it. I'm not sure.
You mentioned being incentivized to further your education and get a doctorate or a master's and getting paid by your school district for getting that. And I think one of the real benefits of being an educator when you were an educator was the benefits. And I know that's taken a hit. What are your thoughts on that as far as incentives for people becoming teachers and how important that is to getting some good teachers and for teachers to be taken care of like that?
Well, it's funny, there was an incident just recently where somebody is looking for a job who has been teaching for 17 years in another district in Ocean County. And when they went for the interview, they were told that only the person who was being hired would be insured, not the family. That would be for 3 years that you would have to wait for your whole family to get insurance. So there was a time at where I was that when the governor of New Jersey raised the rates on insurance, that they were trying to cut costs. So they tried that. And for 1 year, when they did interviews and people weren't leaving a job where their family was covered insurance to come to a job that they'd have to wait 3 years. So we lost a lot of good candidates, and Steve and Doc said, this isn't worth it. We're losing a lot of people. And so we went back to paying. So it is something that does exist in lots of states and lots of places in New Jersey where, you have to earn your tenure before your family is insured. So people don't understand, and I hate to say like the young people, but they don't understand what the benefits really mean for you. Not only your insurances, but what you get with your pension, that you become comfortable when you're retired because of what you did, while you were working. So it's very, very important, all the benefits that you negotiate for.
With that being said, with all that's going on, how do we get good teachers back in the school systems? Is it possible? Do we have to go privatized? Do we have to go charter schools? Because it just seems like it's, the point of entry is, I guess the point of entry for some people is becoming easier depending on what state you're in. But if you have experience, there's also your likelihood of getting a job goes down because then they don't want to put you, some places don't want to
Pay you.
acknowledge your experience and pay you for that. So there's a hemorrhaging of people leaving the field, and there's less and less people going into school for that field. So what if you're the head of the Department of Education, how do we right this ship?
Well, I don't think it's the Department of Education. I think it's of the different districts and also of the states of how they handle that. When you have to value what education is all about, and then you have to reward the people that are in the trenches every single day. And, people sometimes think that teaching is like a cake job. It's not a cake job, Richard, because every day, not only are you facing the students that come into school, not knowing what has happened in their house or on the bus to school. And then you have your teachers that have their problems, and you have parents coming in demanding things that really, you can't change that, nor can the administrators. So it becomes a ticking time bomb that, to try to get, and not only that, but I will say in the state of New Jersey, every year the state would be coming out with more mandates that you had to do. And then it was like, there's only so many hours in the day. And they wanted the schools, and they still do want the schools to take over for the parents. But then when you hear everything that's going on in the news, some parents don't want their kids to learn things about sex. And I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about your human body and what goes on with it and how to protect yourself. So, every day is a new adventure because of what the state and the federal governments, the mandates that they put down for you. But getting back to your question, Richard, I think that like she left one district this year and started at a different district in this state, and she has 22 years experience. She got that job and she got an increase in her pay moving from one district to the other, and this district paid for her expertise. So again, it depends on what everybody's budget is, because it all comes down to how much money you have, or how many people want to value what is going on in the classroom. So
is it possible? Because it seems like with all that you just said, there's a lot more that goes into it than just educating, right? You have to worry about mental stuff and making sure all your teachers are uppity up and have I don't mean uppity up as far as like thinking they're better. I mean, got everything up to snuff. So they're going at a good level where they can teach kids, so kids can get better. So how do you do all that? How do you educate? It seems like it's a system that's kind of set up for failure. Like, how do we need to restructure it? And how do you restructure it? Does it need to be smaller? Do schools need to be smaller? Like Richie said before, like, can it be done on a public level?
well, first of all, when you go to charter schools and to other non-public schools, they don't pay what a public school pays, at least not in New Jersey. They don't. I don't know how they are in South Carolina, or some of the states. It's pathetic what they pay teachers for, what they're paying teachers that are going into the field every single day. But I think there's something that I valued the most. Number one, it's forming a relationship with the students you have in your classroom, and forming a relationship as an administrator with your teachers and with your parents. And most importantly, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or an administrator, it's talking about and telling people what your expectations are, and then having consequences when you don't meet those expectations, and following through with that. And I think there was one thing when I became an assistant principal. I remember Doc asking me, is everything black and white? And you would like to think that everything is black and white. But Richard, in a classroom and with kids' problems and behaviors and where they're coming from, some things aren't black and white, because you have to bend the rules a little bit because you know of a situation that has happened or is in progress. But you still have your expectations. It was like taking the kids to Washington, D.C. I'm taking 500 kids from New Jersey to DC on an overnight trip. If I don't have expectations for the parents and for the students, and that's why it was very important to always have a parent-student meeting so everyone knew what the expectations were. And if you were going to do something that you weren't supposed to do, your parents were getting a phone call and they were going to have to come down and pick up their child. And you know what? In all those years, I never had to call a parent to come down and get a kid because they misbehaved. Now, that wasn't to say that they didn't misbehave. but it wasn't that they were at a level that I couldn't take care of. What the issues were always were health issues, where a parent would put a kid on a bus in the morning with 102 fever, and now at the dance at 8 o'clock at night, the kid has strep throat and can't, has 102 fever and it feels miserable. Now that parent had to come down and don't be mad at me. Why'd you put your kid on the bus with 102 fever? So, there's expectations. People have to know what the expectations are, and the teacher or the administrator or even a parent, you have to follow through on what you say you're going to do. We had a math teacher in the middle school who he was everyone's favorite because every single kid who walked into his classroom, he had a conversation with. So if they played baseball, he talked to them about baseball. If the girl was in chorus, he talked to her about chorus. When they did something great, he praised them about it. And when there were team meetings, the other teachers would, talk about negative things. The kid didn't do her homework, and he would always start out, you know what? Your child is such a pleasure to have in class. And, I talk about blah, blah, blah with them. And the parents then feel, gee, I'm not being attacked by all these teachers. Someone actually cares about my kid to actually ask them what their life is all about. And that's another thing that as a principal, which I would say all the time to my teachers and to the parents, education is more than a book. That's why I had the DC trip for the 8th graders. I had the camping trip for the 7th graders. We did competition day. We did everything that you could learn from, but not have to be in the classroom necessarily learning math or English or social studies, because math, once you get out in life, it's not only about those things. We did the competition day, the lip syncs. If I could tell you the amount of kids that never participated in class, but they stayed after school for a month to learn a routine or do the scenery or be part of something. And that was team building. They learned how to work with people. And I can remember parents coming in, I don't know what you're doing down there, what they're doing in that gym, decorating the room. Well, here, I just got the refrigerator and my son wanted the box because they need it for some kind of decoration. My son has never been this excited about school. So thank you for doing what you're doing. So again, it's not about a book, but it's about learning how to work with people and learning how to accomplish a goal with a whole group of people and figuring out the pecking order of who's doing what. Jim, you talk all the time about, the director, the producer, and who's good at it, who's not good at it. And it's really about a team. People have to know what their job is and follow through with what it is. So it's always good to have them outside and experiencing something that isn't necessarily book related.
I think that's the most frustrating thing for me, is that there's so many people that are just doing the book stuff, and I'm that's not why I'm here. I'm here to make these kids better human beings for when they get in the real world. We had a kid who I have who just got a job at Chick-fil-A. And so last week, he told me he was nervous. He had the job. So we went through like what to expect in an interview, what the questions were going to be, why do you want to work here? Why do you think this would be a good fit? Go through all that. Taught him, like, make sure you have a button-down shirt on, tuck it in, make sure you have a belt on, make sure if you can go get a haircut. If you want to bring my clippers and we'll get you trimmed up. I'm like, look, I do my hair every week. We'll get you taken care of, get a laugh out of it. And then, I said, now the most important thing about this interview, they're going to say, now, do you have any questions for us? And the majority of people will say,
not really.
No, I think we covered everything. I said, that's the wrong thing to do. I said, so let's come up with some questions. I said, so if someone asks you, do you have any questions of us? What do you think you should possibly ask this person? And then he said, how long have you been here?
Yeah.
I was like, absolutely. That's a great question to start with. How how long have you been here? Where did you start? Did you start somewhere where I'm starting and work your way up, or did you come in here as in this managerial position? He said, then the other question that always gets them, and they know that you're interested, is if you hire me today, where do you see me working out and fitting in this organization in a year? So he goes and does his interview and everything, and I don't see him until the beginning of this week on Monday. And he comes walking up to me, and he's got a huge smile on his face, and he says, "I got the job." I said, "There you go." I said, "Well, what was good about it?" He's like, they were really impressed that I asked them questions." I said, "There you go, dog. That's it." So
But see, that's more important because it's a life lesson on what he can use to get himself a paying job and to know how to behave when he's in an interview. So anything that you could have done that day in school, that was 10 times better than opening up a math book and doing math with him.
yeah, absolutely. And that's like, I see myself as like, if I could take on a role as like a job coach,
Yep.
something in that area where I can really, because I've had many different jobs and different careers and um, different disciplines or different types of, whether it's business or sales or personal training, like making these connections, doing these things. I've been on enough interviews. I said to him, I said, you have to go into that interview with the concept in your mind that you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Sure,
Right.
you want this job at Chick-fil-A, from what we've heard, is a good organization to get a starting job in, but you have to realize that there are help wanted signs on every corner in this town, in this
Right.
small little town. So like, you can't be going in there being nervous and sweating that like your life depends on this job,
They
because
need you.
whether you get this job or you don't, you're still going to be in the same position you were when you. If you don't get the job, you're in the same position you
Right.
were before. You didn't have a job before. You don't have a job after. You get another one,
Right.
or you get another interview. I
But
said,
you're
so
better because you got practice on an interview.
yeah,
Right.
and I said, so you have to go in with this, like, yeah, they're asking to see if you're going to be a good fit for them, but you need to come at this like, not only are they asking if I'm a good fit for here, but are these people going to be a good fit for me and how
Right.
I operate? You have to. I said, when I had this interview here, I said, I asked them questions for almost a half hour. I said, and most people don't do that. I
Right.
said, but if I'm packing up my car and driving across the country, I need to know that this is going to be worth my while, and this is going to be of a benefit of me.
Right.
Your people are going to be in tune with what I'm doing just as much as you want to know if I'm going to be in tune with what you're doing. I will say another, talking about, education beyond the books or the X's and O's of taking a test. I have a kid who when he came out for wrestling, he was 210 pounds. He weighed out yesterday at 189 pounds.
Wow. Good.
And like, it's one of those, Jim, it's like one of those CrossFit moments where even though you see someone every
First
day,
muscle up.
well, no, not even that, but you just see, even though you see them every day, one day you just notice like in their face, like, hey man, you've lost some weight. Like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You look good. And so, yeah, he's gone from 210 to 189. And then another, teachable moment, so to speak, is, today is the Day of the Dead celebration in Mexican culture.
Oh.
And so I have to, in that same class with the kid that got the job, there's another boy who his parents, he's Mexican. And so I put it on the board today. And, I asked, what today was, and he told us, and I said, it's something that does your family celebrate this? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, so now you're going to teach us.
Oh, good.
What goes on here? What is this a celebration of? It's okay. It's a celebration of your loved ones that have passed. And I said, so what do you do? And he told me, we set up an altar. We have pictures out of the people, and then, my great grandmother, she liked to smoke, so we put out some cigars, and then she liked. So he's like, hey, to the other Mexican boy, he said to him, so he said, what's English for cerveza? And the kid's like, he started laughing. He's like, it's beer. And so he's like, oh yeah. So we put out some Modelo and some Corona, and we're just going on and on. And then so like we were talking about tortillas, and I said, they say you don't like tacos, and I'm like, I do. I'm like, but I'm more of a flour tortilla guy. I don't really like corn tortillas, and I don't like eating flour anymore. I try to avoid it. And then I said to him, so like is our flour tortillas, is that a gringo thing? And they all started dying. They thought it was hilarious that I referred to myself as a gringo. They were dying. And I'm like, wait, so there's all these different things that they just, you could relate to them, but they're just like having the kids meditate. They were like hysterical the first day. And I'm like, what's so funny about this? I'm like, well, no teachers ever asked us to do this. We've never been asked to do this in school. And I'm like, well, that's not there's a first for everything. Or I had my jug of water on the desk today. And so the two kids were like looking at it. And they're like, Mr. Airey, where do you get your water at? I'm like, why? They're like, this water is so like clear and perfect. And then I went into the whole thing about going up to the spring and why I go to the spring and all this stuff. And then one kid's like, wow. He's like, there's all this stuff out there about like how to be better and how to be healthy. And Mr. Airey, he actually does it. And so then I was telling him all about fluoride and stuff. And, we've done some things, and the kid that's lost the weight, I'll say something. He's like, no way. And I'm like, look it up. And he'll look it up. He's like, you're right. I'm like, so we were talking about something to practice the one day, and I said something, and all the kids were like, that's not true. That's crazy. That's not true. And I said to the kid that lost the weight, I said, have I ever told you anything and you've looked it up and it hasn't been true? And he's like, nope. He's like, Mr. Airey's right. He's like, it might sound crazy, but it's right.
So, I don't know am I right, but I probably did a podcast on it.
So yeah, I mean it's super frustrating about the whole like teaching to the standards and not like to the students, and the teachable moments, and making real life connections and relating things back to real life and how they're gonna.
But I think
how to help them be successful in the real
I
world.
think that you can teach the standards. You don't have to teach to the standards. Just teach the standards, and you build your evaluations on types of questions that are going to be asked on the test, but it's your own test, and practice makes perfect. But people who teach to the test, they make it so that it's very boring for kids. You can still have teachable moments and do all of that stuff, not teach to the test. Teach the curriculum. And if you're following what is in the curriculum, that should be what's on the test. Problem with the standardized tests, and I don't care if it's in New Jersey, North Carolina, because they use the same testing people. Pearson usually is the one. They put out all the testing materials and all the resources for teaching it, and they make money. It's a money-making gimmick. So if you follow your curriculum, you should be doing okay without teaching to the test. You teach the curriculum.
There needs to be more curriculum that is real world applications, real world applicable. And I think doing away with things like wood shop and auto shop, or kind of outsourcing them into some of them go to, it's like, if you want to do this, you have to go to the vocational school. It's not offered.
But you know what? The vocational schools, it's the fact that if you teach those vocational school classes with what mirrors the math, the English, the science, and all of that, it's zeroed in on what it is. If you're going to be an electrician, small engine, it mirrors all of those things, and it's applicable to what they are. So it makes sense to I'm going to say special ed kids, that they can't put the connection together with what physics is all about because it's not applied to anything they know in real life. Geometry
That's
doesn't.
not true.
What?
I think if you have, let's just say auto mechanics or auto repair, like there's certain aspects of that.
No,
are
I'm
very-
saying in those classes, they do it. That's the application
She's
of
saying
it.
there's relatability in those classes, but
Yeah.
on paper there's not.
Exactly.
Right. But that's why when kids go to vocational school, they love it
Yeah.
because they couldn't get it in a physics class, but they sure in heck get it in a auto shop or a electrician, because you're applying that principle and now the bells go off and they know what you're talking about. So yes,
But I also
vocational
think
school.
there's more, I don't want to necessarily say a push, but it's definitely more of a topic of discussion. Whereas in early 1990s, for someone like myself, like that was something that never came up in a guidance meeting or in any one of those career clusters or anything like that. It was never like, other than a class trip, there was never any sort of like, hey, does this interest you? Would you be interested in vocational school? It was the kids that were out in the back by the cheese bazaar that were smoking cigarettes. Those were the
Hopping
kids.
on a bus.
Those were the kids that were going to vocational school, where it wasn't like, oh, you like to cook? Well, we can fit it into your schedule where you go here and learn how to do baking or whatever, but you're still going to be able to come back to school, do your college prep classes, and still be able to be an athlete. Like
Well, unfortunately, what they did was they used vocational school as for special ed. And a lot of times when kids got into their special ed, it was over their head because there was no connection in what they were doing. But when they opened the magnet schools up in Freehold and all those, there were 5 high schools, they all specialized in something. And then it was on an academic level where it showed kids where you could go with that type of education. And it made all the difference, because not only was it auto mechanics, but it was medical, it was performing arts, it was all of those things that you could choose which ones you want to go to. And it made a difference on how kids perceived what school was, because they got a benefit out of it and they could see where they could go in college or in, I think the biggest push that people make is that everybody should go to college, and that should not be that everyone goes to college, because college isn't for everybody. And you know what? When I first started at my job in education, I can remember it was a 8th grade study hall that I had, and in the end of the year, I was asking, "Oh, what are you guys going to do in the summer?" And, "Oh, I'm getting a job. What are you getting a job for in 8th grade?" "Oh, I'm clamming, because when I turn 17, I'm getting a truck." And you know what? Those kids had better trucks and better cars than the teachers, because they worked from the time they were in 8th grade and they made big money. And you know what those kids do now? They're captains on fishing boats, or a lot of them, their parents were electricians, plumbers, whatever. They didn't go to college. They went to trade school, and they make more money than what I was making as a principal. So it's the way they package it.
Those kids are NASCAR drivers too, right, Mom?
That's right. That's right.
And didn't he tell you one day he's gonna be making more money than you?
Yeah. What are you going to do with your life? Miss Airey, I'm going to make more money than you ever say. Yeah. And of course he did.
Does he still drive?
Yes.
Do you have any more stories like that, or do you have other stories that kind of stick with you, where you had a kid that was always in your office and now either has kids that are doing well or is making
I have
lots of
one
money?
really good story. So there were a group of kids that used to terrorize their teachers, and unfortunately they traveled all day together. So they had affluent parents. So one Friday night, the parents were going out to dinner, and 5 kids come into the house when the parents leave, and they're in their liquor cabinet, and they're drunk, and they hear the parents are coming home, and so they run into the kid's bedroom, and they're jumping out the window, him being the last one. And when he's so drunk that when he goes out the window, he leans forward and his legs go to the top of the window and break the glass, and it guillotines him in the neck. So the mother walks in and he's bleeding. He's got the glass in there, and he actually died twice on the way to the hospital. And he came in on, the mother came in on Monday to tell me what happened and everything. And, she said it's a miracle that he's still alive. So he comes back into school. And so he was in 8th grade. He was in there for 9th grade, and he was still a nudge. And fast forward 2 years before I retire, it's back to school night. And it's the end of the night, and I'm standing at the door saying goodbye to everyone. And this kid comes up to me. He's a young adult. He says, "Oh, Mrs. Airey, I had to see you. I just wanted to apologize to you for the way I acted when I was in school. I know I was so bad." He said, I went down to see Mr. because I know I was a pain in the neck to him. And he said, "I want you to know that my daughter's in school now. She's nothing like me. You'll never see her in your office." He said, "And I want you to know that I went into business with my father, and we really have a really good business on the island, and you really would be proud of me." So I go out to dinner with a lady that had retired, but this kid terrorized her all the time. So I said, "Wanted to let you know, I saw, Kevin, and he came up to me at back to school night to apologize on his bad behavior." And she said, "You know what? He wrote me a letter and apologized to me about how bad he was, and he's embarrassed of his behavior." I said, "Now, isn't that a life story that somebody could recognize how bad he was? He's a father now. He would never want his daughter to behave like that." And I said to him, "You know what you put your mother through?" So, yeah, that was a good story. And then there was another story that had a kid that when he was in 4th grade, he had twin cousins that were playing cops and robbers or Indians and whatever it was. And he went into the closet and he got his father's gun, and he shot his cousin, and his cousin was quadriplegic. But by the time they got to the middle school, he did everything for his cousin, wheeled him around, did every single thing for him. And now it's deer hunting season, and a kid comes into my office, and he was always in trouble. But he comes into my office, and I'll never forget, he had a black leather jacket on, and everyone thought he was so tough. So he said to me, "Mrs. Airey," he said, "my father wants me to go deer hunting. I don't want to touch a gun ever again in my life. Could you call up my mom and talk her to tell him not to?" So I call up, and she said, "Mrs. Airey, there's nothing I can do. He wants his son to go hunting with him." So we fast forward, and he goes hunting with him, and he comes into school a couple of weeks later, and he's having a bad day. He comes into the office. I said, what's the matter?" And he said, "I've never told this to anybody before." He said, "But before I pointed that at my cousin, I put that on my head." He said, "And when I go to bed at night, all I see is my head exploding all over the place." He said, "And that's why I can't sleep. And I'm so cry every night about what happened to my cousin, but that's the scene I see all the time." I just wanted to take him in my arms and say, So again, that's something that you come in, things aren't black and white unless you know what the kids experience. So teachers don't always know all that stuff because sometimes you can't tell them that stuff.
Did that kid get help? Like, is that your responsibility as an administrator, make sure he goes and
Well, I was
speaks
in
to someone?
contact with his mother all the time.
That
And
sounds like some PTSD.
well, yes. And child study team worked with him. But he was another one. It's at an orientation, and at the corner of my eye, I see this gentleman, and I know who it is right away. So as soon as the meeting's over, I go up to him and I said, I can't believe it. And I said his name, and he said, you remember who I am? I said, I will never forget you. Never forget you. So, yep. Some kids make a big impression on you. And again, he was also, my son is nothing like me. Don't worry about it.
Well, talk about these moments that stick with you, and doesn't take much, just take someone to come up and tell you a story like that or something. I had a kid that came to we have like this thing called Power Hour, where it's 30 minutes of lunch, and then they get 30 minutes of free time, or if they're not doing well in their classes, they have to go to a teacher for enrichment. And so I have kids that are coming in, and sometimes they bring stragglers with them. They bring tag-alongs, and I usually don't have that many where like space is a problem. So kids come in, and I meet them. I ask them who they are, what they do, whatever, blah blah blah. So this one kid comes in, and he's a ROTC kid. He's got his ROTC uniform on, and he does the competitions and stuff with them. Not just the drill competitions, but like the obstacle course stuff and all that. So I said to him, I said, what do you do in the wintertime? He's like, nothing. I said, well, you should come out for wrestling. Come on out. So he ends up coming out, and he's been out, and he just got student of the month for November.
Okay.
He came to me one day, because I tell them, like, we're not cutting weight here. It's not what I'm about. It's not part of the sport. It's the worst part of the sport. I don't want anyone doing that. If you want to lose weight, you need to eat right. You don't know how to eat right, come see me. We'll talk or whatever. So he asked if he can come see me again. He's been practicing for 2 weeks or whatever. So he comes in, and we're talking about, losing weight and doing this stuff. He wants to lose 20 pounds or whatever. And so we're talking or whatever. And he's like, I never did a sport before, but I really like wrestling. I'm like, well, that's cool, man. I appreciate that. And I was like, well, how come you've never done a sport before? He's like, well, I just never thought I was good enough, or this, that, and the other thing. And he's like, to be honest, he's like, no one ever asked me.
Right.
He's like, you asked me, so I figured, why not try it? He's like, and I love it.
Again, it's about relationships you make with kids, and one little thing that you say, whether as a coach or a teacher, goes a long way with a kid to make them feel like $1 million, or to shoot them down.
Well, exactly, positive or negative. And like
Right.
you said, like, you might be having a bad day, but that individual might even be having a worse day.
Right.
And for whatever reason, you say something or explode because your coffee spilt or whatever it may be, and then you just made an even worse day, for that person, and they were having a bad day just because you didn't know what they were going through and you took it out on them. So yeah, I'm just trying to spread positivity, and I'm not worrying about some of the other stuff I've been talking to you all about the past couple of weeks. It's just that's not what I'm here for. I'm going to focus on what I've been doing good and continue to do that. And, like I said, one kid said, I forget how he worded it or whatever. He said, I'm inviting you to come out for wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
This is an invitation.
Right.
Those sorts of things. So some days it's easier than others, but that's why they call it a practice.
Yep.
Lorraine, you've mentioned a lot about teamwork and group building. Is that why you guys push athletics so much?
Well, I'll tell you the story. My father and my mother were not healthy, but my father had his first heart attack when he was 43 and his first stroke when he was 47. So as a kid, when you talk about trauma, that was, imagine going to school and your father's being wheeled out in a stretcher, with the ambulance. And of course, mommy and daddy made us go to school. So all morning you're worrying about, how your father was. And
And then they're
so,
making you crawl under desk because it's the Cold War and you think you're gonna
yeah,
get nuked.
yeah. But I mean, that was very traumatic to go through. And then when he had a stroke, and every day one side was, drooping, or it was very tough from seventh grade, and really until the time he died. But I always said, and Grandpa, his nickname was Smokey, so he was smoking from the time he was like 7 years old, and he loved his butter and he loved his beers. So I always thought that athletics, and of course we lived in a neighborhood with all boys, so if you wanted to play around with anyone, you had to play sports. So we did sports, and when daddy got sick, it was like, you know what, I want to be a physical education teacher, because if I can save one person from going through what he went through, I want to make sure I do that. So when I was able to go into phys ed, that's the reason why I went into phys ed, so that I could make a difference for people, to make sure that they were exercising properly and knowing what good health meant for people, so that incorporated with physical education, and knowing about your body, so that nobody else had to go through that. Now, having said that, when my father had his heart attack, you're talking about in the 1960s. So how they treated a heart patient in 1960 as to how they treat them in 2022 are entirely different. And perhaps he would have, if they did to him what they do now, maybe he would have lived for, more years than what he did. So that was the reason why I went into physical education, was because I wanted to make an impact on other people so that they didn't have to suffer the way he did. And knowing that, looking back, that genetics have a lot to do with, what your makeup is. And, you can't change your genetics, but you can certainly help it along, so that, I'm not going to eat, 10 tons of butter, because I know that cholesterol was an issue in my family. So you have to watch those things. And none of us ever smoked. And because my mother would be downstairs doing the laundry, and somebody put my cigarette out, and we'd look at each other, I'm not touching that thing. I'm not touching that thing. So, but when they were growing up, everybody smoked, and it was, a horrible thing. So that's why I became a physical education teacher.
But I mean, I appreciate you sharing all that, because I think that's a good reason. I think that was, we need more of that in the world today, for people becoming physical education teachers. I was referring more to with the Airey Bros, with Richie and myself. Was that why you guys push sports so hard in movement? Because obviously, we both have movement practices. You move every day. Is it same reason?
I think that it was just something that, you guys started young in sports, but I will say that you only did one sport per season, not like kids do today, where they're doing 4 sports a season. But it was something that, by the time you guys were in high school, that became kind of like a social thing for parents sitting in the bleachers talking to each other. And, I have to say, being a parent of a wrestler, that was torture for me. Thank God when Richard wrestled, it was, okay, you're at 103, you're going first. I guess in your junior or senior year, they changed that, Jimmy. And that was torture, that I might have to wait until the end of the match, until you wrestled, because I was on a diet. I wouldn't eat when you guys were wrestling, because then I would have to go to the bathroom. So, yeah. And, it's just sports. I mean, it's just part of our family, of what we did.
Was there anything, now I guess I should say we're getting into the raising the Airey Bros part. Was there anything that with Richie that prepared you for me, like learning curves growing up, anything?
I will say that you two were two different types of kids. You were both very good babies, but Richard was very active, but he also required a lot of sleep. And he could sit down and read a golden book. I used to put him in the playpen while I was doing my housework, and he would look at a book. You know, he was only, 9 months old, and he would look at a book and he loved it. You would eat the book and, literally. And Richard would sit on your lap, and you could read a whole book to him and he would love it. You would not sit on anyone's lap until you were 5 years old to read a book. So that was a big, big difference. But you were also active. And I think another difference in you two as young children, Richard was very, very, very shy. So let's say we were going to Christopher's birthday party. He would sit on my lap until like 20 minutes before it was time to go, before he would go play with other kids. Now, this is when he was little. Jimmy, you were leading the pack of, you were very social. You could talk to anybody. You could go up and talk to, adults and all. Richard was very, very shy. So your personalities were totally different when you were young.
I remember one time it was like a Tupperware party or some shit. I don't know what it was, but we got there and there was a teacher from the school, from my school, that was there. She was like a friend of a friend or something. And I was like, I didn't want to interact with her. I didn't want to acknowledge her. So I figured if I just sat on Lorraine's lap and held the paper in front of my face, like the book in front of my face, like the old man, that it would be like my stealthing cloak. It was like my invisibility shield. And
Right.
Lorraine was so pissed. She was like, go play with the other kids. And I wouldn't get off of her lap. And then finally the teacher came up to me and was like talking to me. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was socially awkward since day one.
Yeah. And then I think because Richard had his seizure when he was in 4th grade, and that was traumatic for him, with doing, he was in a oxygen tent. If he got a cold, he was going to get pneumonia. And one time he was in the oxygen tent, and so as a little kid.
At the house or at the hospital?
No, he was in the hospital.
Like and a bubble boy tent?
Well, he had to breathe.
No, but I'm trying to create a picture for the audience here. Was it like
there was a plastic,
or was it like a
no, it was a plastic thing that was pumping oxygen.
No wonder I'm so fucked up.
He's at the high altitude tent.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a rough time in his life, and thank God, he took up his.
I should be able to collect disability at this point for those traumas.
I mean, really, when you think that, and it all started with Ocean Road School because there was so much mold in there that. Remember going to Dr. Dakotas' office, Richard, and everybody in there was from Ocean Road.
Dude, my elementary school was like doctor's office on the regular daily and weekly.
Yeah,
mine too, though, too. Even though it was a new school, I was sick growing up too. Second grade.
I was sick.
Well, you were sick for sure.
Sick.
I was in shit.
Yeah. So, I mean,
how long was that?
How long was he? I think by the time he went to middle school,
you were sick that whole time?
From kindergarten to 5th grade, I was like.
Well, not kindergarten.
What do you
4th
mean?
grade.
Kindergarten was Ocean Road.
Yeah, I know, but you didn't get.
Kindergarten until 5th grade, I was sick all the time. But I had the seizure in 4th grade.
In 4th grade.
But it wasn't like that. That was just a culmination of 5 years leading up to that, where it was Children's Hospital, allergy test on daily or sometimes weekly. And then after that all went down, then it was the freaking orthodontist for 5 years.
Yeah. But I remember going to
I remember one time we had to go to the orthodontist, and it was the day we had the field trip to Caddyshack. And we
I
were just
said,
like fucking jumping in the swamp and stuff. It was like up to my tits in freaking mud. And like she comes to pick me up and Jesus Christ, you smell. We gotta go to the freaking orthodontist, blah 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 blah. Oh, dude.
well, when I took you home and you changed, it was, yeah.
I won't repeat it, but she definitely probably dropped the JC for sure.
It was
The
like
only,
picking up the car at in the apartment.
Oh. Richard, I'm your brother. Oh,
Dude,
there
was another time. There was a whole half a season of my baseball career where it was it had rained or whatever, but we still had a game, but I didn't play at all. I was in the dugout with John Bowers, and it was at rain, so there was just all mud in the dugout and stuff. Kids were like splashing and kicking, and there was just mud all over me.
Well,
And
that's because your coach was so
Mr. Delon. It was all fun and games. You thought you were getting the cool team because you were getting some ice cream when you won, but then you weren't winning all that much. But
yeah, you were getting ice cream.
Came out,
mud on your outfit.
Came out with mud all over me, and I wasn't even. I might have been fucking around a little bit, but I was just kind of caught crosshairs more than anything, and went into the dugout at the start of the game with clean whites and an orange t-shirt. And then when I came out, the pants were just as orange as the t-shirt. And boy,
well, I can remember. I'm going to say, I think we covered a lot with the education. And again, there's so many stories. Jim and I have talked a lot that people in school always tell me I should write a book. People wouldn't believe that in a, pretty affluent school that the stuff that goes on still goes on regardless of where you are. But, it was always a very good experience. I enjoyed it and enjoyed being the mother to two very good athletes and actually two pretty good kids that are young men now. And I love their.
Definitely not young.
Well, it's hard to believe that I think
I'm half dead at this point.
Well, that's what
you told Daddy at 40, bro.
Yeah. So
he doesn't. People don't forget. Don't you worry. He still reminds me.
Oh, yes, yeah. So
especially now that I'm 46.
Yeah. So.
I got one last one. Lorraine, you're one of our biggest fans. What's your favorite episode of Airey Bros Radio?
Oh,
David Weiss.
What? Huh?
David Weiss.
There's a couple of them that I liked, but I really enjoyed Lieberman a couple of weeks ago, and only because that was just, recent. And then also whoever did a year ago, the one with the walking, with the light also and the diets. And I mean, I think you do a good job with those, but I really enjoyed like all the athletes that have been around here that you've interviewed, and to hear them and how much they've progressed and how successful they have become, and some of them not in sports but things related to sports. So it's always amazing to find out. I said the most recent one, DeMarco, I was telling Richard, Jimmy, I don't think I talked to you about it, but how to give up 60 of your clients thinking that maybe they would stay with you because you're going to do away with CrossFit and you're going to do things more tailored and differently. And then you present your case and now there's 60 of them leaving you. That would have to be really traumatic to your person and to your business.
Yeah, I think it goes to having something you're super passionate about and driven towards, and just that being part of your drive and knowing that that's what you need to offer your clients and having integrity with that, and just this is what we're serving. So it's very respectful and really interested to watch how that grows and how that concept goes, because I think those days of group fitness are over.
Right. And I think just going back to you guys, I think you improved a lot by making it not a 3 hour or 2.5 hour. An hour, hour and a half is a good length of time to capture somebody's interest for that amount of time. So I think when you've shortened it, you've made it better for people to listen to.
We just got,
Yeah.
we just were super excited when we first had the studio. We were like a
Yeah.
kid in the candy store.
Yeah. But I mean, and I don't watch the visual part of it because I listen to it when I'm doing my walk or something. So to me, I couldn't tell the difference whether you were in the studio or not. So I like the brick background, Rich.
That was the selling point of this place.
Yeah.
Serious.
Yeah.
This whole side of the unit upstairs too. This is all
Yeah,
brick,
that's nice.
so I like it. It's
Yeah.
like a coffee shop / brewery /
Yeah.
library, comedy store, you name it. It's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
dope.
nice.
Rapid fire, Jim.
Lorraine, how do you brew your coffee? How do you take it?
You say, "Are you a coffee
Yeah,
drinker?"
Lorraine, are you
Jeez,
coffee?
for
Well, I know
loving it.
she's not. I know she's not. That's why I said it.
No, I am not
are
a
you,
coffee drinker. Go ahead.
Lorraine, are you a coffee drinker?
No, I'm not a coffee drinker. I love the smell of coffee. I just can't taste the taste is just so bitter. So no, I'm not a coffee. I'm not a tea. So orange juice or water in the morning.
Do you have any daily practices that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
I try to be strong, little Mighty Mouse, but I do, I do my walk every day, and I do my some of my weightlifting, some of the exercises that you've given me, Rich, over the time to keep my bones strong, and if my neck isn't bothering me, and those things actually help to make my neck stronger. So yes.
What are you listening to right now? Music, audiobooks, podcasts? We know you're reading something. What are you reading?
I'm reading a political book, so I won't get into that. But a podcast is Rachel Maddow's The Ultra.
I won't get into politics, but I'll tell you
No,
about
this
Rachel
is
Maddow.
no, but it's really about. It's not about today. It's about World War I and World War II and how the Nazis infiltrated, into the United States, and the whole path about all of that. So
Operation Paperclip, huh? Coming over to the dark side, are you?
No, I mean, she does a very nice job. You should. I'm on my 5th episode.
I told you
I know about
Operation
Warner von Braun.
Tried to tell you about Warner von Braun and Operation Paperclip before
Right.
COVID.
Well,
Told me I was a crazy person.
Yeah. No. So that's very interesting. She does a good job of laying everything out. And unfortunately, there are parallels that, parallel to what's going on today. And as people were ignorant back then, people are ignorant today too. So that's that. So that's what I'm listening to. And I listen to Spotify. If you guys aren't on it, then I'm listening to a podcast or one of the musics. I like Adam Lambert and Queen. That's my standard to do my walk with. So
listen to ABBA.
Yeah, ABBA I do. Simon and Garfunkel.
Give me, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm not a music person anyway. So,
but you are though, because you always listen to music.
Yeah.
I listen to Simon and Garfunkel because of you.
Yep. So.
Well, I will tell you, there are 2 students that I have that are in theater as well, and they listen to show tunes. I guess that's what they call them, but they are huge fans of Mamma Mia. So I have relayed the stories of waking up to ABBA on a Saturday morning and a vacuum cleaner bumping the door, and they've all gotten a laugh out of some of my stories. So
actually, I've seen Mamma Mia like 5 different times. I saw it like 2 times in New York, one time in Las Vegas. I saw the movie, which was nowhere near as good as the play, but the plays were outstanding, outstanding. So yeah, nonsensical, but very entertaining.
Lorraine, we've switched this final question up in honor of you. So
Should ask her what her favorite conspiracy theory is, though, because
What'd you say, Jim?
we've changed it up. We don't ask what the favorite conspiracy is anymore. But if you have one, I'd love to hear about it. But our new question to close out the show is, do you have a guilty pleasure?
Do I have a guilty pleasure? I like chocolate. Try to stay away from it because it obviously isn't good for you, but I love chocolate.
What kind?
I like milk chocolate. I know you're supposed to eat dark chocolate, but I like milk chocolate. A story of when I was at school, when we were stressed about, getting ready for the standardized test and the state coming in to monitor, and all, go down to Wawa and we'd get a Hershey bar and we'd eat it, the whole thing all by ourselves. And if it was really stressful, we get a king size one.
All right, chocolate it is.
But it is.
Well, since
Yeah.
you're down with Rachel Maddow and her research on Operation Paperclip, you might want to look into the, how
You
they
did
have,
it.
they
You
have
did it.
like, go ahead.
You did something with somebody on chocolate. You did a podcast with someone that did something with chocolate.
Was that Marty and Fontes?
I think so. Yeah.
Did the tobacco stuff and the
Yep.
cannabis, the mold.
Yep.
Well, I guess like with, like they call them blood diamonds, like the people digging in the mines in Africa and stuff,
Right.
harsh conditions. I guess there's similar practices in the chocolate industry.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about. Yeah. Okay, guys, signing
Good
off.
seeing you.
Thank
Yep.
Love you.
Lorraine.
Love you too.